Oh.
There we go.
All right,
Let's repeat right from.
Yeah.
Let's start.
We're all good. We'll carry on.
Yeah, we didn't miss anything. So sorry for everyone who's watching, we were muted. We just kicked it off. We introduced the team and we're now getting into the workshop and the objectives and what we're doing over the next year.
Excellent. Thank you. So we'll move right into the objectives. So the objectives of our workshop today are specifically to share with you the recreation amenity needs assessment model. So we have been working on a model of how to determine the needs of our recreation site. So we are going to share that model with you. Big part two is looking at the principles that have actually been a huge part of developing the model. And this is where we want to get your feedback on those principles and do we have the right principles in place. We're going to do an actual hands-on exercise where you're going to get to look at all the priorities and principles and then assess the value or your priority around them. And then if there's anything missing. These principles will be really important because we are actually using them to determine at the end of the day what are the recreation facility needs for our community based on our engagement and your priority of our principles, and then we'll bring that report back to you. We're also going to discuss the public engagement plan. It is a really big part of this project. We really are excited to have conversations with the community, and so we are going to share with you what our plans are to date on that. And then we're going to just talk a little bit about next steps and next time you'll see us and what we'll bring to you in the coming months. Next slide. Thanks, Susanna. So just wanted to remind everyone that when we talk about recreation amenities, what we're really talking about is all of the recreation facilities that we have in our inventory that are in our service level. So this pictograph here shares with you all of the community recreation facilities we currently have within our inventory, both indoor and outdoor, and the number of amenities we currently have. And then as we go through this project, we are also going to look at any new amenities. So as we talk to the community and our regional partners, we know there may be some new amenities that will come forward. And so we want to also include those in our planning.
When do you want questions?
You know what, if you want to ask them along the way, sure.
No, I'm just curious out of that previous graphic, how many of them are actually owned and maintained and operated by city versus maybe partners?
These currently are all city owned. There, and the little, does this one have the asterisks on it?
It does have the partner facilities.
Yes.
As well.
So the one with the little asterisks beside it are partner facilities. So we have some tennis courts, but we also partner on our tennis courts.
Yeah, no, that's great clarification. I just wanted to make sure because I knew the curling rink, obviously, we own the building, but we don't operate.
Right.
Programming.
So partner site, yes. So anything with an asterisk means that some of those facilities are partnered as well.
Good.
Yeah. So so as we work through this project, we've kind of divided it into sort of three categories or three big chunks of work that we're doing. So the first piece is what we know. So we've spent 2 years working on a recreation amenity needs assessment report on our current state. So that's the data that we've used on terms of our utilization, which means our number of hours of bookings, our number of people who participate in programs. We've looked at our regional scans, we've looked at trends, we've actually looked at our asset condition of our facilities as well. So everything that we have in terms of data that we've looked at right now in all of those recreation facilities that I just showed you. So we spent about 2 years working on a large report that sort of compiles all that information, which Susanna's going to talk a little bit more about later. So we've developed a model that will assign principles and scoring to determine our priorities on which facilities will be most important to build and move forward with first. So today we are going to do sort of a fun exercise with all of you in terms of helping us determine what those priorities are and where that looks like. So that's all the what we know. So the what we know piece, we've done a lot of work on already. And now we're really excited to find out what we're going to learn. So we are really excited to have conversations with the community, our region, many stakeholders in terms of what they want and what their desires are and what their needs are. So we know it's not just about needs, it's about wants, desires, and all kinds of things. So we want to really hear from the community and understand what that is. And then we want to test that against our principles and what we already know from the data that we've already gathered. So there's a whole piece around what we're going to learn. And then what it will be is really the objective of this work is determine what we will build next or what our recreation long-term facility plan is going to look like. So based on what we know and what we'll learn, these and the priorities that we set for future recreation facilities, then the next really fun part is the culmination of a report back to council in terms of what are our options in terms of what could we build, when could we build it, what will be the costs, and all of those kinds of things. And then we'll have more conversations about how really to move that forward. Because there's never really one way to do this, there's many ways. And so that's why it's really important to have this conversation today about our priorities and how we need to base our decisions around our priorities. So I'm going to hand it over to Susanna, who's going to take you through a little bit about the data that we've collected and the what we know piece.
Sorry, I do have to stand because I'm very small. So good afternoon. I'm Susanna Wood. I'm Recreation and Parks Analyst, and I'm really excited today to be here to talk to you about the Recreation and Amenity Needs Assessment and how this work is going to help our team to better understand and quantify the community need for all the different types of recreation amenities that we currently offer, and also those that maybe we don't currently offer but may have a place in our community in the future. So my section today is going to focus on what we know. So what we know about community need for recreation amenities is captured through our Recreation Amenity Needs Assessment. The output of this assessment is a measured level of community need for each different type of recreation amenity currently in our inventory, as well as new or emerging recreation amenities. The needs assessment tool provides structure for our planning. However, assessing community needs is not a simple or formulaic activity. We know that this is complex and challenging work, and it requires a lot of thought and discussion with our team and with the community. Our planning process takes into account the many internal and external factors that impact our service delivery, and analyzing what we know is only the first step that we're taking in terms of determining recreation amenity priorities. So now let's look at the needs assessment specifically. So predictive triggers, principles, and criteria related to recreation amenity development exist in many documents and through our own departmental historical practice. In 2016, we used the first iteration of this model when responding to council regarding the proposal for the city to build a gymnastics facility. So we've been building on work we've previously shared with you guys. Since that time, we've continued to document and refine the principles to where they are today. There are 12 assessment principles that are grouped into 3 different assessment areas. We measure the level of need based on each amenity's alignment with the needs assessment principle. The stronger the alignment with the principle, the higher the overall evaluation result will be. So we present the evaluation results as either a low, medium, medium-high, or high community need. We've provided a one-page summary that you have on your table there, the colorful document. So that document just summarizes the 3 different areas that the principles are within that. Sorry, I left mine on the table. Oh, no, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew which one I was talking about. I would have banned it. Sorry. Okay. The first assessment area, the philosophical assessment, focuses on the amenity's overall philosophy of use and how the amenity type strategically aligns with the services that the city provides. Here we would ask if the amenity is part of our current service inventory, if it has specific corporate or council direction related to it, if it supports current or emerging recreation trends, and if the amenity is dynamic and adaptable, which includes how many months of the year it might operate for, how many activities it can be used for, and that sort of thing. The program assessment looks at how the amenity is being used and by whom. This is the section Diane referred to where we get into all the data and usage hours and financials and all that kind of thing. It explores the program of the amenity as it relates to financials and industry best practices. In this section, we would ask what percentage of the users are St. Albert residents, what groups would use the amenity, if it supports diversity in users, and if the amenity is accessible. We would also look at it if it has enough use to require an allocation policy, what the utilization rates are, and if there's any revenue generation and or sport tourism draw.
And an allocation policy is just funds dedicated to it, or what?
It's a process for how we determine how we allocate our facilities to different users.
Okay.
Thank you. So last assessment area is community feedback. This takes into account the public's opinion. It explores the level of need and support from community groups, the residents, and the region. Here we would ask ourselves what our community surveys are indicating, what our community groups are asking for formally or informally, what kinds of questions we're getting from the public through avenues such as council inquiries, social media, comment cards, and the like. Anyone have any questions about that? So when we look at each assessment principle, each one has many considerations that are used to help provide context for the ranking that we use. Some of the principles are an easy yes, no, but many of our principles are more qualitative and require discussion, consultation, and thought. As an example here, the significantly served St. Albert residents principle provides a ranking of 5 for amenities that are serving 100% St. Albert residents and 0 if it was only serving people from outside of our community. To figure out where in the range it fits, the principle poses several questions for evaluation. These questions will continue to be refined as we learn more about our community and how to better answer each question. As you can see from this example, it's important to look at each amenity individually, but also we need to look across all our amenities as we're answering these questions as well. And also, this is only one of 12 principles that are used for evaluating community need, and all of the principles are taken into account through the needs assessment to provide an overall scoring. An amenity that might score low on this assessment principle might score higher on another, resulting in a net negative or a net ranking. So before we move on to our exercise, which Amanda is going to take us through, I just wanted to know, do you have any questions about any of the considerations or how we apply them?
Susanna, by sport boundary, you mean like, for example, baseball, hockey, potentially the catchment area, and the fact that certain different programming require a larger boundary outside of St. Albert itself?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And do we take into consideration whether it makes money or loses money? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the financial considerations are part of the program assessment. So we look at the capital costs, we look at the operating, we look at it whether it generates revenue or not, but also in that area, we consider whether it's important in terms of a low cost, no cost opportunity as well. So it's just one piece, but we know we need to have a provision.
Do we look at whether or not another community offers a similar amenity nearby and their opportunity for partnerships?
Yes, yes, we do. That's part of our community feedback principle. Yeah, we look at what's being offered in the region as well as through the work that I'm sure you're aware Diana is doing with the ICFs.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the discussion at that group, and all of that wisdom and knowledge and conversation that's happening at that table, Diane is bringing back when we're working through the assessment as well.
So if I can give you a little bit of a visual on this, so think of it as a spreadsheet, and across the top are all the amenities, and down the side are all the principles. And we give a ranking for every each one of those 12 principles. Each amenity is ranked with a different number, usually between 0 and 5. And so every one of the 12 principles is quite different. So as we go through and look at each of the amenities, if some make money, there maybe get a higher ranking. If some are more social benefit or accessible, they will get a ranking or a number. And so when we look at all of our amenities at the end of the day, there will be some scoring. So there is some analytics to this in terms of, and then it groups it into highest priorities. And it's not we're not going to come back with 1 to 53. Here's our facilities. It'll be, these are the sort of the top 10 that came back based on all of our ranking. Here's the next 20. And then we're going to have this whole ranking system to give us some, I guess, structure to our priorities, how we move forward. And then again, the next layer that will come on will be, so then what would fit on the site and what are the best amenities to go forward and what are the costs? So it can get quite complex, but we thought at least if we had a scoring system to start with to give us where the priorities are. And this also includes the community feedback is built into this scoring system as well.
And is that weighted?
They're weighted, yes. And that is, as we're going to get into this exercise today, that's really why we need your input, because we want to make sure we have the priorities right. And we want to make sure that there's nothing missing, and also that you support, I guess, the principles that we're going forward with.
So is there, in relation to scoring, I mean, some of that you've mentioned is definitely data driven, so it's qualitative, but there is aspects of it that could be subjective. You will have to assign a score based on some feeling.
Well, it's not so much the feeling, it's the questions. So each of those principles has questions that we would ask ourselves as we're doing the scoring. So there is guided as we go through it.
Any other questions? Okay. Okay. So as we look at each individual principle of each assessment area produces a different priority for recreation and amenity need. So as we enter the final stages of our development of the model, it's important for administration to understand the prioritization of principles from the perspective of council, as they should be prioritized reflective of the current corporate and council priorities, regional climate, and other factors. So this engagement is also to ensure that we have captured the most important criteria in the context of recreation development from a council perspective. So to better understand that, Amanda is now going to take us through a little bit of exercise.
This is my token part of the presentation.
That's all right. Probably the most fun part.
Yes.
I was not.
Get up. We get to get up and move around.
So what we've done for you is you'll have a series of cards on your table there. And each of the colors aligns to the colors that are on your handout. So what we're trying to understand with this exercise is within each of these kind of buckets of assessment, we have the principles, and we'd like to see which principles are more important. And as Diane indicated, what we're trying to do is figure out, is our weighting right? Do we have them kind of in the best priority and the best weighting? So what we're going to ask you to do is first starting off with the orange cards, which are those philosophical assessments. And please refer back to that handout that has a lot of the questions that help you understand what each of these principles mean. Just on your table there, I know they're quite small, so hopefully this will work. If you could just lay them out in from the top of your desk or whichever way makes sense for you, in what principle within that orange bucket you feel is most important or the highest weighted principle. All the way to the bottom, they can overlap, they can be at the same level. You give me 5 in a row, that's fine. But it just gives us a really good sense of where your priorities are at within the bucket. We'll just give a couple minutes for this, and then if you need more time, just let us know. And this is more of an individual thought exercise, and we'll bring it all together, but we'll start with the orange ones if that's okay. Do we want to do all those throughout or just? I think I see most people not moving anymore. So I'm going to ask you either mixed and matched with the orange or by itself, whichever you choose. I've got the order wrong. Blue. I don't have X. So the blue principles are the program assessment. So as Susanna said, these are the financials. These are the heavy data driven, what we know about our users and where they're coming from and what they're paying and all of that stuff. You could also do the same exercise with just the blue cards. And like I said, mix them in with the orange or don't, whichever you choose.
Can I ask a question? Benefits the broad community, that means like our community, but all different groups within our community, like accessibility.
Broader community.
Okay.
Please feel free to poke and prod and ask questions as you understand them.
I would want little or no room to grow.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess it's written more in the negative tense. It'd be facilities that are currently at a high utilization.
At capacity.
Add little or no room to grow.
Okay.
So that's, we need them because we're at capacity. Sorry, that didn't make sense.
We have words with that one.
Yeah. If you have any suggestions for that principle too, we'd be happy to take that.
Could you just say existing capacity?
At existing capacity?
At capacity?
At
Or,
Yes.
Yeah.
And benefits the broad community means benefits past St. Albert, because we have one that says serve St. Albert and the other one else.
The first one, the St. Albert residence is about our community, our resident community. Broad community would speak to that, you know, an amenity that has a sport group that there's 100 members would get a lower scoring on that one than a sport group or than an amenity that was accessible to a lot of different sport groups that had a lot of participants from the community. more specialized use versus general use.
Does this mean it's more general use?
Yes.
Yes.
So that goes back to my initial question. So I was taking it like accessibility for our residents, but you're actually talking about maybe benefits, broader sports community, recreation community. So it could be, again, soccer, baseball.
Multiple
Hockey.
users, multiple
Oh,
functions.
okay.
And it can be accessibility, serving underserved populations. So we're looking for, in general, what that principal is speaking to, how many people could this amenity possibly serve?
Okay.
Is it serving people that we don't necessarily reach, or could it serve an underserved population? Those.
See, I have a conflict with that one because I see those as two dynamically different. One serves a different purpose than if we're going to say significantly serve St. Albert residents, and we're talking maybe we expand that into like those accessibilities, those types of recreation opportunities that on our other residents that are probably can't get access to just due to any number of issues versus sports communities that could basically maybe pay for extra access if we allow them that service, right? So I mean, I'm seeing the differences there between benefits, broad community. I just took it as more, oh, we're looking at all aspects, seniors, physically challenged, young, old.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the primary difference between the two really is, are we drawing the significantly served St. Albert residents is, are we drawing a lot of people from outside the community to that amenity? Versus serves a broad range of residents is, are we reaching as many people with that amenity? Is it broad use or is it fairly niche?
So Red Willow Trail would be a recreational facility. I would call that a facility. And that
Trails, yeah,
example is something that serves
broad use,
the whole community.
right?
Yeah,
Yes.
so we'll ask you just to take your last green ones and same thing, feel free to layer them in, look at them separately. And this is our community feedback. So this is based on what we know right now and what we've heard. But feel free to layer that in and then we'll,
What is this? What is regional support? Like, does that mean that financial support or other guys said, like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, so that does mean the region is supporting them financially or through services or,
I guess
was that important?
money type of thing?
Yes. So is that important to us in our priorities that we have our partners, regional partners contribute?
We have that option.
You have hate, you have white card.
Not quite yet.
But it would,
Come on, Amanda, I'm jumping in.
it would be interesting if the region or the county was to say, we'll give you money for this rec facility when it doesn't align with what we want. Does that bump our, just because we have the money, but we really don't want to build a golf course? I don't know.
Great example, Mayor, and that's why we have so many principals, 12 of them, because we don't want one to supersede the other necessarily. So if someone's going to give us money to build something, that's a nice thing, but it's not the only thing. So there's many other principles that we would evaluate against to make sure that we're making holistic decisions.
So help me with these two, vocal resident and vocal community,
Resident would just be like people.
The individual.
but need support. So you need their support or,
Oh, that,
but they're asking for, yeah, help me out.
Lobbying us, that's the question. That's like the residents lobbying versus organizations.
Yeah, and we did have need and support both indicated on there. It was something that actually came up when we were looking at the outdoor pool. Because, you know, there was a lot of resident groups who necessarily didn't need more use, like as an individual, because maybe it's not a facility that they needed access to, but it's something that they supported in terms of our community continuing to offer that service. So one would be about the community specifically, and then one would be community groups.
the resident. So when we go for public engagement, we want to hear what people need, so sport groups or individuals. But then also if the community supports more trails or more pools, may not use them, but they support them as an important amenity in our community, we want to hear that too.
I'm a little bit concerned just about the use of the word vocal.
Yes, yes. We talked about that one too, of wordsmithing that, and we're happy, like it's,
Yeah.
these questions are great. We need to really look at our language here and make sure we have the right,
Yeah, because I don't want the loudest three people on St. Albert to dictate what we build.
right.
That's why I almost want to put these as low because,
Put them at the bottom.
yeah, because they would, If they're that important, they elevate up into a council priority, which I've already got on top, right? So,
Yes,
I don't
so
Can we not just scratch out vocal?
right here and now, we can take vocal out and just say resident needs support, community needs support. Happy to do that.
You need a pen? Okay.
Done.
Done. You like when the action happens on the spot. And
One point
again,
that we can make about the vocal, it's strictly because this is what we've heard to date. And we are, and Danielle will talk about it, how we're going to hear the voices we haven't heard.
It's a true description, though. It is the vocal people that always speak up.
You can scratch off,
They're really good people.
Sheena, you can scratch out vocal, if that'll change your.
That's what you missed. We're taking vocal out. Yeah.
No, you just scratch off vocal. You just have resident need, community group. Basically, it would come through a whole bunch of different ranges like cultivate, well, all of the different community feedback mechanisms.
I'm back on lap two here, we're good.
Okay, you're back around, you circled around.
So this is the last little bit, and with Mayor's permission, we'd like to take about a 5-minute break after this, just to do some reorganization. So what we'd like you to do now is looking across the bucket, so all 3 colors, as well as anything additional you can write on your white cards. So principles that you think we haven't captured or things that maybe aren't showing strongly enough for you. We'd like you to rank everything together. So again, it can look like a straight line. It can be a pyramid. You can have it in whatever shape you'd like. We just want to understand between the 3 areas of assessment, where are your priorities and how do they all combine? And we'd ask that you leave that on your desk for us. Susanna's going to come around and take photos, and we're going to try and transfer them onto the walls as best we can so that people on YouTube can see them. And then we'd like you to talk, once we come back from the break, we'd like you to talk to what your priorities are. We have some questions for you to consider as you do this final bit. Do we have the correct considerations? What have we missed? Are these principles kind of hitting home for you, or are there things that we've missed? And what are your highest weighted? So we'd like you to share not only what they are, but why you feel they're the most important as we consider community needs for recreational facilities. And then do we have the right principles? So talking about both those questions we ask and the actual principles themselves. Are the 12 enough? Are the 12 too many? And then are there any other questions that maybe you don't see on your handout that should go under one of those principles as one of the key criteria? If we can give maybe
before we break, I'm a little confused by this. Council priority, corporate council priority. Seems to me that this exercise drives.
yeah, that's true. That's why I put it at the top.
And so I'm just wondering if I missed something. Would there ever be a council or a administrative priority that would supersede the will of the people in our community?
Good question. You want to take that one? Take a stab at it.
On holidays.
He's on holidays,
You're in a hunting picture.
Let's come up, I guess. I would say these processes, the planning process for any type of takes 4 to 5 years, typically for probably 3 now, I guess. So, there's certain points you can make change, but after we get through certain dates, it's kind of hard to switch course, I guess you could say.
So what came to mind was if service place burned to the ground, all of a sudden it would become a corporate and council priority to replace it. But in the absence of something like that, I didn't understand how this would play out.
Yeah.
Outside of of what else you've described here, I just want to make sure.
So maybe using it as an example. So right now with the council's strategic plan, corporately, active transportation is one of the priorities in the plan. So our trail development has been given priority because that is a corporate and council priority moving forward. So and as council continues to evolve and the priorities change, there could be things that come forward that our recreation facilities would align really nicely to and would be a higher priority.
disc golf or social skating on the river are 2 that received they got a higher ranking on that specific principle right now because
There's a motion from council.
there are motions from council. Bike skills.
I would say this just trumps everything, so.
I put it at the top. I put it.
Yeah.
I put it just at the top.
Between all 3, not really.
Well, I didn't.
Well, that's too
I
bad.
put mine 3rd down because I think that
corporate or council priorities can change depending on what people want. So I think we listen and we're third in line. We're not first in line. So.
So with that one, if you choose that maybe you don't think that's a valuable principle, put it to the side and we'll, you can speak to that as not being something that you think you'd like to have as a principle, and then everyone can have some conversation about what that looks like.
I just wanted clarity because.
Yeah, so that's how in our model, in our tool, we are using it, that if something is a council priority, has a motion, those kinds of things, it would get a higher ranking than something that maybe, or in that particular category, than something that didn't.
Thank you.
So you want a rainbow list now?
Yeah.
You just lowered your disc golf
I
down.
made mine diagonal.
Well, that's okay, because if we didn't, if we heard from people that disc golf wasn't a priority, then
There you go.
it comes off.
There you go.
But with the way you've got it, the weighting is so the weighting is corporate and council priority weighted in that philosophical assessment. Does it provide more weight? Is each one of those columns different weighting?
So that's where we're playing with this right now, what the weighting is. So
In columns.
we actually have them weighted within each of the 3 buckets right now.
Yeah.
So within the orange one, we've weighted those 4 and as opposed to all together, but we could look at them as all 12 and weight them as 12, but we've weighted them within each of the bucket areas.
Then each bucket is weighted, does it each bucket add up to, like, let's say 25%, 25%?
Really great questions. Yes, those are all the things that we are. So right now we've weighted each of the buckets equally in our pie. A third, a third, a third.
Yeah.
But again, that could be where you could tell us that you think philosophical assessment should be weighted higher than community feedback, or community feedback should be 50% of our weighting, and the other program would be 25, or however you see that this weighting may impact the outcomes and how you'd like to see that.
This is gonna have a separate conversation about that then?
We can add that in after we go through everyone's priorities. Sure.
That's a big conversation.
Okay.
Another question?
Yeah.
So what I saw maybe missing here, or maybe it's captured in supports current or new emerging activities, is for me, it's a priority that we offer a huge spectrum. So, yes, every municipality has ice and pools and maybe a tennis court, but not all, and now pickleball is probably everywhere. But disc golf was new. Mountain bike skills parks are new, the croquet curling, like all these things. So I think that's a priority, to have a little snippet of everything in a community. So should I write that on a white sheet?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So it's not captured in supports current or new emerging.
Not as a separate category. So it's under programs. So we do look at trends. So emerging trends do come in, but it was one that if we want a separate category for it, we could look at that.
Okay.
Sure, it is definitely, it's part of the consideration after we go through the actual ranking exercise against the principles. There's there's an art.
Yeah.
Recreation planning, and definitely a diversity and multipurpose facilities are 2 principles that is very important to recreation development. We don't currently have it as a principle, but we would love to take that as a takeaway.
Okay, opening up Pandora's box, is art recreation?
Is art recreation? We're focused on physical recreation. We'll leave art to the culture.
It's our next for that.
No need to be like that.
Okay, what next?
Yeah. Talk's important.
Okay. So when you let us know you're done, we'll come and take a picture and we'll go and post them on the wall. So if anyone's done,
I'm done.
great.
Are we posting new pictures? I'm looking.
We need to be listening. Alignment with current services is last for me because I think you can change those. And then regional, and then, so regional down to individual is, so I guess my white ones here are really about the future. Are we aligning our community amenities with growing to 100,000 people? So are we really looking at Flourish and all of the things in Flourish around recreation, complete streets, modes of moving, whether it's running, walking, trails, Like, I really want to make sure, because that's a wonderful document, and if we could actually achieve it in its truest sense, I think that our amenities would reflect that. So, and my other one again is about the future. When we're talking about this, are we imagining this 40 years out? Is this what we're going to look like in 40 years? Because I think amenities are such gigantic infrastructure projects that you really have to be thinking, what are we going to be looking like then and not now? That's kind of hard, but comes back to being dynamic and adaptable.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. Between the three buckets, program assessment, we will just throw the question in there now because of time. Between philosophical assessment, program assessment, and community feedback, do you feel any of those three should be weighted higher or lower than any other?
No, I think to me they're very equal, and all those considerations are important. I mean, sorry, that's the easy answer, but it is kind of how I feel.
2 years of work came to the same conclusion. Thank you. Councillor Mackay?
Oh, yeah, that's a good segue. So I mean, obviously, I need a graphic artist to help me out here. But I mean, I see it more in circular. I've always thought that way, circular in the sense that, I mean, I did put corporate council priority in the middle, surrounded by the community feedback, right? And so that's kind of where I see this. I see it growing out. So from the philosophical being on the outside, but it still is, it's all in mesh. So I do sort of see what Councillor Hans is talking about with the equal weighting, but at the same time, I think there'll be challenges with that because we obviously take a great deal of our feedback and our moving forward as based on what we hear back from our community. And how we inform our community is going to be important too, because that'll come from a different way. So I mean, as you kind of move out, I've got a few intermixed, but that's not meant to be. So I mean, so the program assessment kind of falls in after basically what our residents are telling us based on what we're doing. And then, like I said, the philosophical is on the outside. The one I put up on top isn't necessarily just on top, but accessibility, such as you probably heard from me. Accessibility is such a important thing, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, and I think our outdoors meet that, but I think we have to incorporate that through. So I think that's a philosophical statement or comment. So, I mean, kind of looks like a clown face when I'm up this close to it, but I mean, it's meant to be more of a circular and with council in the middle and then kind of as a hub and then moving up. I mean, you could flip it around and have philosophical in there that feeds programs. So I mean, I'm not against that either because you could move it in, but on my first blush, I thought one was the outer ring controlling and then the other ones were service delivery, but you could have it the reverse actually.
Nice.
Councillor Jolie?
So I would agree that all three are important. And I'm going to steal Jackie's and put her two white ones right at the top. Because I think that really is the role of council, not to be deciding what St. Albert needs to be in 6 months, but what it needs to be in 30 years. So absolutely agree with those. I see the little or no room to grow is really similar to need. If there's no need, then there's going to be capacity. You know, right now we have enough tennis courts because there's not that really big demand for that right now. The financing I kind of put all together. So fiscally responsible, that could include regional support, and also prioritizing any kind of amenity that's going to bring in revenue. So we know that gyms or people work out bring in revenue, they support swimming pools, and we know climbing walls do that. So those are the two ones that we know those make money and they're inexpensive to run. So prioritize that. And then again, making sure it benefits the community. I see benefits the broad community as accessible. I see those as the same thing. I'm not too fussed about kind of deciding, oh, what's the newest and coolest thing. If it serves people, it's going to be up here, regardless of what's the new cool thing. Best practices are always important, but I mean, they have to fit in here. Service levels, I'm not fussed. We can get rid of them or change them if we want to. corporate or council priority, I got rid of it because at the end of the day, that's gonna trump everything. If we say, you know, build a fire hall, that's what we're gonna do, regardless if there's need or support or anything. So that's on my list.
Thank you very much. Mayor Harris?
Sure. I put council priority at the top. So I guess it's because of Trump's, maybe, so it's probably the same thing. I had benefits the broader community here because I feel the more people we're serving, the better use of our tax dollars that is. Notwithstanding, I do believe that even though not everyone uses pickleball, it's still really important to have. That's why I did add, does this proposed recommended already exist in the city? Because I feel we need to offer this larger variety. Climbing wall was one that I was thinking we don't have in St. Albert, and like not even on a private scale. So that would be good. Diving is something we don't have in St. Albert. And so I'd like to see a balance, you know, where we're going to build another ice rink just because we're at capacity versus building something new. And that, to me, that is on par, but I think that something's going to have to tip that. So, and honestly, I would probably tip it to the new thing. That would be me. I put dynamic and adaptable here. I do think it's important because if you can build a tennis court that can be adapted to pickleball, that's important. If you can build a soccer field that you can adapt to polo, which we don't have either, and we have an emerging trend in polo because there's immigrants and those kind of things. So I like the adaptability of it. You know, the whole support by residents, I crossed out vocal as well. My biggest concern when you're going down this road is you're not going to hear from everyone in St. Albert. So, and not everyone who contributes to the conversation will have all the information. So although it's an important piece, to me, I have it down here because it's just a piece of the puzzle. Because when you ask whether you're going to rank all three of these third, I think the philosophical assessment should be a little heavier because the other two kind of change your philosophical approach to everything. Community feedback will change how you look at council priority, right? So that was my thought. And then, yeah, the whole, everyone's current service centers, I think they're ranking them pretty low. So, yeah. And when Jackie's point about the broader region, I think if we should need to think of our own needs first because it's our own dollars. If we can get support from the region, especially financially, that would help, but hopefully we would get them on the same side as us, that we need this for St. Albert residents, and hopefully our residents need it too, but our residents take a priority. So.
No bike skill park? Come on.
Oh, that's a new amenity. So I would rank a bike skill park over a new ice rink. Those new things that we haven't built before that people want. Like this weekend, I was riding my mountain bike around Crimson Lake on the off trails. I'm like, oh, this is fun. For me to take my bike off trail, you can't do that in St. Albert.
For Saskatchewan too.
Yeah, they have good ones out there. So I'd have to drive there unless Riverlot 56 would let me in there, but they won't. But so I would love to see something like that developed in St. Albert. So new stuff. I'm done. In mountain bike skills.
Okay, for me, so read this as here's the assessment, and priority reads this way. So I'm not sure I have all that much more to add. I wasn't necessarily one thing I like about St. Albert is people speak up, and it's up to council to assess whether we're hearing three loud or whether we're hearing 20,000 murmurs. To me, that's our role to understand that. So, yeah, I too like the idea of new. I think that's part of the assessment that we have to do is whether or not just because we're at capacity, does that mean that we need another one? Not necessarily, but climbing wall, that's a great idea. The bike skills park's been out there forever, and we got to somehow close that loop. So those things are a priority for me. Dynamic and adaptable spoke to me because it talks about fiscal responsibility. So if you spend $1, if you can get more than one use out of it, or then I think that we're being wise in spending our dollars in that way. I also don't think that we can ignore the vocal opposition if it's out there. We do that at our own peril. And I think we saw that, and I think we reacted appropriately to the library question. The community clearly didn't like the $22 million one. They were less offended by the $4 million one. Right? And there was still some that vocally opposed that, but nonetheless, it was a good reaction, I believe, on the part of council in that respect. And then the rest just follows along with what everybody else is. To me, I took council priority off trumps, but to me, the council priority derives from our community and the needs assessment, or the program assessment. Right?
Cricket, that's what I'm saying. Cricket.
I was thinking polo.
Cricket.
I was thinking if we're gonna build a climbing wall,
Confused
Wes,
how
if
you're
we
gonna-
build a climbing wall, you and I will need an elevator.
You and I have to have an elevator on that
Sand
climbing wall.
volleyball. There's so many things we need here. Where?
I'll put it here.
Behind the one play park.
Oh, you know what?
I was hiding behind the
That's a
pole there for
great
a second.
question. I'm not sure that I would rank. You know what? If one third honestly works. If you dingle too much with that, I'm wondering if program isn't required. Is it a priority? No, right? If the community doesn't want it, doesn't matter what our philosophical assessment may be. Right? So I don't know.
Great.
We can argue about that one, but.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay,
Ray.
I just put this on here because it's hiding behind the pole. I looked at things a bit differently. I put these, like the area I think is of major importance is program assessment. I think so. What significantly serves people of St. Albert, what benefits the broader community, what's fiscally responsible, and what is little or no room to grow already, because then we know it's successful. If there's little or no room to grow already, we know it's working. We know people want it if it's full. So we should look at that. If it serves St. Albert residents, we're here for the residents. If it's fiscally responsible, we're here to keep track of the cash. And if it benefits the broader community, I thought I interpret that as all different age groups and different types, young and old. So like that's kind of key. And then I would probably raise this one up here a bit more. Is it dynamic and adaptable? Because I've been in fitness for like 35 years of working out, and I've seen so many trends come and go. And from CrossFit to, like, I used to play racquetball, then I played squash, and now I'm looking at pickleball. And there was a little bit of tennis in there somewhere in between, and those all changed. And now you look at racquetball courts, nobody uses them. You look at squash courts, they're dying. So things have to be adaptable in recreation, because you have to have these spaces that can flex and change because different needs. 10 years from now, pickleball could probably be gone too, So I think that's key. Supports current and or new emerging recreation fads. I kind of just talked about that. It's kind of important, but I think if your stuff is adaptable and dynamic, then it can serve this, because then you can change the racquetball court to the pickleball court to this court to that court. And then alignment with current services I thought was pretty important. I kind of agree with this council priority. That's kind of like based on all this, then council should come up with their corporate priorities and priorities. So I don't know why we need to say that. Aligns with best industry practices. To me, that's kind of a given anyways. If you're going to build a new facility or build any kind of recreation facility, it should align with best industry practices anyways, because if it doesn't, why are you building it not in accordance with industry practices? And then these bottom three here, I think the vocal word is the right word to leave in, because this is where this council has gotten a lot of trouble listening to some kind of vocal group. So we had the recreation, the gymnastics guys, we listened to them. They tugged us one way, went all around the other. That was a vocal group. We had a vocal group on the pickleball sound attenuation, dragged us all over the place. We shouldn't be listening to the vocal groups, the people who speak out. We should be doing program assessments and needs assessments and everything like that, and take the information from that and not knee-jerk reactive vocal people who come in later in the end. Because it's all these people are gonna come in. We've heard from every vocal group, like what the hockey guys, they come in, the cross guys came in, everybody comes in, they're all vocal. Don't listen to that. That's kind of noise to us. We've got to base it on program assessments, what our residents want, all this research we've done, and then take the action. So that's my points. Again.
So I added it, I think that about the, how much is it gonna cost to build it is the top, and whether or not, how much of a debt load we're gonna be having. So that's about whether or not we have partnerships to help pay for it and how much is it gonna add on to it. Because we're already looking at potentially pretty high tax increases moving forward, and how much is it gonna have to be bracing ourselves to do is actually the top thing, because you can add everything you want, but you can't afford it, it's not gonna help. And then the second thing was the fiscally responsible model, which again is about how much it's gonna cost to operate this puppy. And again, are there gonna be any partnerships or something? That's a variable. If there's an opportunity for us to take advantage of it, we should be exploring that first before we go any further. And then of course, just like I just said, it's not emerging, but whatever is currently, what are we dealing with the current needs is, I guess, emerging. And I want to sort of send all the residents because we're paying for it. So it's, I guess, we residents who are paying for it would be the ones. If Sturgeon County wants to chip in a bunch of money, then certainly we will consider their needs as well. But who pays for it should be the one who gets to make the decisions. Then it was just about capacity issues that we need to be considering. Original support, to me, it's if we can get it, great. I'm kind of doubtful that we're going to get a ton of it. So, but it's not. I'm not going to change what we do just to make them happy, I guess is the thing. I think about, like, even if Edmonton was to build something, I don't think they would change the design of their building if we said we're going to put in a couple $1 million. And so we should just be like, if we can get it, great. We'll listen to you, but this is what we're building. Do you want in or out? I guess is how I thought of it. Dynamic and adaptable is with a flexibility thing as well, just to see whether or not we can actually change things according to needs. And then it kind of goes into this third row of as far as the resident need, it's really difficult to determine that, quite frankly. We get the people who come in and talk loudly, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have the support. The library came and gave a massive campaign for 4 years in the previous council about how much they needed it, but the website showed that the residents didn't support that. So we, whether or not somebody's organized for their campaigning is really about whether or not they're coming forward with it. That doesn't necessarily mean it reflects the needs of the broader community. So I agree that that just needs to be heard, but not necessarily responded to. And then I added about expansion phases and how fast it can be built. Because it's not high on the list, but it's about like how are we actually going to build this? And then it's about what needs to be built when and how long will it take to actually achieve results? Because I think also people would like to see some low hanging fruit sooner than later. So if we can say, for example, that we're going to do the bike skills park or something outside, that would be quick and not expensive. And then with the intention to build something in a later phase, then they can see some results now without having to say, you know, in 7 years from now, we're going to be getting something to you on that land. So that was the other thing. And then the corporate council priority. I mean, the thing that I look at is that this administration bringing forward recommendations to us. So it's not, we do the trumping when the council does the trumping. So that, but they can't guess our trump cards. They just respond to them accordingly. So you really can't get a deal with what you got already. Yeah, and then obviously you just want to build it so that it's actually proper, so we're not embarrassed about it by the end. So that was an obvious statement. So that's it. That's
Just the last question is between the 2 years assessment.
program assessment needs more weighting in my opinion. The other two are really kind of almost symbiotic. In fact, I'd probably say it'd be like a program and then philosophical and then community feedback, just because it's difficult to wage community feedback. That's just.
Thank you. That concludes our exercise. I'm going to pass it back to Susanna, so she's going to give you a little bit more information about how we're going to use some of this feedback.
Okay, so once we've completed the scoring of each amenity against the principles, we're going to start to look at what that data tells us about community need and where each amenity is coming out. As part of this first stage, we have completed this work based on what we know to date. But as we move forward into our community engagement as part of the community amenity site development, which Danielle is going to speak to next, we're going to refine what we know to include what we have learned to provide an updated assessment of community. And we just wanted to share with you guys all of the work that we've been happening and it's been happening in our department around recreation amenities is captured in the recreation amenity needs assessment document. And you've seen this little sections of this document we've pulled in to give you a background and a history and kind of a foundational understanding as we've responded to IRs and admin backgrounders and that kind of thing. So this includes all the considerations that were used in the ranking of the model. It includes a history of the amenities, utilization metrics, financials, regional scanning, capital plans, and more. We continually keep this document updated as a source of truth that's reflective of what we know at any given time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Danielle, who is going to talk about how we are going to move forward from here.
Thanks, Susanna. Good afternoon to you all. I'm going to take a few minutes to walk through the next stages and the next steps with regard to the Community Amenities Project and the public engagement, public participation plan. So really that what we will learn, as well as the concept, the Community Amenities Concept Plan development, but what we will be that we've been discussing this morning. So, excitement is really mounting as we're beginning planning for the initial stages of the needs assessment confirmation and the public engagement and concept planning for the community amenities site. The initial stages include the community engagement to further inform our recreation amenities prioritization, which will basically affirm the priorities for our city for recreation amenity development in the coming years. I think you spoke to that about what does this look like in the next 10, 20, 40 years. Susanna spoke in great detail about the science that we've been working through over the past years to affirm the community's recreation amenity needs. Now we begin the art portion of that project. So it's really to validate and affirm the information that we've been so meticulously compiling and analyzing in the past years. In the coming weeks, we'll be securing a consultant to manage the public participation portion of the work we're going to take on coming soon. They will be responsible under our guidance to determine the levels of engagement that we will be using throughout the project to inform the best methods to collect that feedback and to prepare reports on what we hear from the community. The forms of engagement can vary and we may include open houses, cafes, surveys, pop-ups. We'll work with them to determine the best methodologies to work through. The art of that work is taking all the diverse and expressed community opinions and balancing that with the information that we currently know, what we know to be true in our current operations and our needs assessment documents. The subject matter expertise that the public engagement consultant will bring to this project will be so valuable to ensure that we are asking the right questions in the most meaningful way and that we're reaching the diverse stakeholders that we have in our community. So making sure that we're hearing from the broad populations and whether that's organizations or individuals. So initially starting in the fall of this year, the public participation plan will be broken into multiple phases, which are the major components of what we will learn. So in phase one, this is really a feedback opportunity primarily relating to our needs assessment document. And this public participation will also be used to inform and validate our needs assessment information. It will be an opportunity to ask questions of the community and stakeholders to get a few key questions about our needs assessment document. Specifically, we want to know, did we get all the information in our needs assessment right? What's important for groups and individuals to share with us to tell the full story? Did we miss anything really important? And also, what else do we need to know from your organizations or from individuals just to represent the full scope of what the need in our community is? It will be really important to invite the broad public and all interested community stakeholders to be involved in these conversations. This may mean some really tough conversations, but really valuable as well on services and amenities that our public hold dear. This dialogue will create a more in-depth understanding of community need, and as a result, a better end product in our amenity prioritization for our community. Administration will take the information that is garnered through this public engagement process and update our needs assessment document. And this is that art part of the work we spoke about, where you have to really take the information we have that's very tactical, it's very analytical, and we have to take the information we hear from the public and be able to, it's malleable at that point, so you're trying to work within that. The framework for priorities will then be used to inform the concept planning for the community amenity sites, which is planned to happen in spring and summer of next year. So really, the public participation is a critical component of good governance. It ensures we make solid, sound, and transparent decisions as a municipality in service to our community. A focus of the engagement for the community amenities project aligns with our corporate policy to be transparent, inclusive, responsible, and leverage opportunities for continued improvement in this and future public participation. So we've been working really hard to come up with a comprehensive starting list of what our amenity stakeholders will look like, and wanted to provide you just a bit of a framework on that today. So really, we see our regional partners, and we've spoken about that, or other municipalities in the community. There's our community partners, which are local, sport, communities, service clubs. We have a strong breadth of very active community partners, and we want to make sure that they're represented at the table. We have our residents, who are the full general public. They're those people that use our existing facilities, they use our trails, they use all of the amenities in our community. So we want to make sure to engage them as well. We have our members of council. So we know at the table right now, all of you, but as we progress through an election too, we know that the new council will have some feedback on that as well. So engaging our council through the planning process to gather feedback and to provide updates routinely. Schools, we have 3 active school divisions that within St. Albert that need to be vetted through this project for both land allocation and reciprocal use. We know that we have diversity and inclusivity representatives that we need to bring to the table. So that aligns to those partners, the public, and the organizations that represent diverse and inclusive individuals and organizations that are essential to make sure we have robust engagement processes. And we have lots more that I'm sure we haven't identified in this chart. They could be internal staff, it could be subject matter experts, could be a great number of things. So this list is not provided to you in any priority sequence. It's just meant to show you the breadth of really the different stakeholders that we've identified to be involved in this project. It's critical through the engagement portions of the project that administration listen to all of our representatives and understand the varying perspectives of the individuals and the organizations in order to make the best decisions for our community as a whole. So a question I wanted to engage with you today is, are there other stakeholders that you as our council representatives can think of that haven't been inventoried on this list, or that are key that we know about as it stands today? There may be more that come to light, but I just wanted to open that conversation so that we can make sure we're cognizant. Councillor Broadhead.
I'm sure the list that you put together is fine and holistic. My question, as you go out to the public and to the stakeholders, is how are you going to pose the affordability question? Is it going to be a pacing question, a priority in terms of build this now? But I mean, ultimately we have to ask the question, are you willing to sustain 1.2, 1.5, 5% tax increase annually in order to afford this? Somehow we have to ask that question because it's within that context of priorities. Right? I'm just wondering how you plan to attack that.
So at the first stage of public engagement, our engagement is really to vet the needs assessment and the prioritization document. So we would get into the concept plans later on, and that can be a component of some of that work in terms of what comes up at the top list of priorities that we need to develop in the coming years. Maybe we can align some costing questions around that, if that answers your question.
Well, if you give people a list of amenities and say, pick your priority,
Cost.
they don't know how to assess that need, given, you know, maybe they want $100 million rec center, but realize that our community can't afford $100 million rec center. So I'm just wondering how that context is going to be.
Yeah, so as we move from confirming what we know, where people are seeing capacity issues, where they're not seeing themselves represented in our recreation facilities, accessibility, inclusivity, that kind of thing, we'll bring it into a concept phase, because until we understand what the priorities of the unit are at a strictly recreation level, what do you really want? What is really concerning you? What are you missing in our community? It's really hard to give someone, hey, pick column A and column B and say, you know, you get to pick between $50 million and $100 million investment. We don't know what those two numbers will entail and include. So the plan is with phase 2, we'll have options, and we'll obviously be vetting this with council as well in terms of, you know, this, you know, list of amenities is approximately this cost. We'll have this tax impact. And so we can use that information once we have a better understanding of what the public is palatable on an amenity perspective. Then we bring in the cost conversation, because we really need to understand needs and desires first, because to try and project out a site that may be, 20 years worth of development, and we build a pool first, and then we build a bicycles park, and trying to assign someone a cost and say, make a decision now before you've even seen what that looks like is a very difficult conversation to have, and probably won't be fruitful at this early stage. But certainly in our phase 2, when we have some concept plans to go to the public and some real idea of what it will cost to build. Is the plan.
So I guess I hear what you're saying though, Councillor Broadhead, is that we want to make sure we're not setting up the community for expectations we can't achieve, right? So I think that's a really valid point. And I think that is something that we will want to look at as we move forward with our engagement. I think though, to Amanda's point, it is really important to understand needs, desires first. And I think if the community says they want a pool, we can build a pool 5 different ways with 5 different levels of costing. So I think that once we know what they want, if it's a pool, then we can go back and look at, well, how big a pool, how much we want to spend. So those are kind of the sub questions that we can go later on as we're building the concept. But to your point, we do want to make sure that we're not setting the community up for expectations we can achieve. Here's, 50 different community amenities. What do you want? Like a candy store, right? Where it is really, where we probably can't build we know we can't build all of them. So we'll make sure that we include that in our
And I
engagement.
think that's a really relevant point from an angle of bringing a public engagement specialist, that we will ask the right questions, so making sure that we give some context to the questions we ask too, to make sure that it's appropriate to the feedback we're looking for. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
That's really
Good question.
Anybody else? Councillor Hanson?
Thanks. A couple of things come to mind. I'm thinking not-for-profits, scouts, brownies, all service clubs, all of those things. So I'm guessing they probably fit into the many more at this point. I'm thinking about seniors, and I'm thinking about 30 years out, 40 years out, what is our demographic for St. Albert going to be? And does that start to define what some of our focus on programs will look like? So we're going to have large families, and we're going to have big houses, we're going to have row houses, we're going to have more seniors. So, and to, I guess, to Councillor Broadhead's point, how do you help people with this conversation think about 30 years out? Because you can't cost that today, really. So people can only come to the table sometimes with the experience that they have. If they're a hockey family, then it's go hockey, go. If they're a soccer family, but if they're people that are just, recreational, use the trails and stuff, that's their experience. So I don't know how, I think that to me is going to be the tricky part of your work, is trying to help people see into the future about this isn't just about your kids, it actually could be your grandkids. And how do we see our demographic going? These are some of the things that people have to be thinking about. Not just today, I want a big recreation center with pickleball courts.
And sorry, go ahead. Well, I think that's a really great point. And I think at this point, when we look at what are some of the amenities, that's where I think all of you identified adaptable and flexible and dynamic as important, and it really is important. An example is when we were building Service Place, it was traditional that gymnasiums were built with 4 walls and 1 gym court. So being flexible and adaptable was to build 3 courts with curtains that you could adapt that to larger activities, to events, to those kinds of things. So again, getting the needs and desires of the community, they need more court space, but what does that really look like is really, where you look at the future and the future trends and how we can make that space really adaptable as things change.
Yeah, just on that gym space, because I'm in that center all the time. That gym space is the most adaptable space in the whole place, because it's volleyball, it's basketball, it's aerobics, it's pickleball, it's everything's used on there. The floor is laid out for everything. There's all sorts of lines on it. Like you say, you can pull on heating walls. And I think that's kind of the key here, is adaptability and flexibility, because that is a space that's used more than any space. Is it not in the rec center?
It gets a lot of use and a lot of adaptable use, right?
Yeah.
Like spontaneous versus programmed use as well.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
For everything, right?
Yes.
And I think an analogy we had with Mr. Heltz today is like looking at the 100-year plan for facility development, but knowing that's going to change and morph with the trends and the needs of the community as you go through that time span.
Yeah.
And how do you evolve your operation and the spaces to make sure that they're able to meet the various needs as you progress?
The trend would be make a court that could use for anything. You know, so all the walls move, it can be tennis, it can be, well, it can be racquetball in the future. If court sizes change, you can just shove that up and move that in, and you know, that would be the perfect thing for court sports.
But, and the art of that is to make it multi-use, but
Right.
not multi-useless.
Right.
So there's that balance between making it multi-use, but not useless.
Like now you got all these racquetball courts, you got pickleball courts,
Yes.
and you got squash courts. Would it be?
But a squash court-
One in Fountain Park into a play area, right?
Yes.
And the other one's active, but it's got a wall that moves, so it's more flexible, right?
It could be a climbing wall at some point.
Yeah, it could be a climbing.
Yeah, a boulder.
But then again, like you say, 10 years from now, people may not be into climbing anymore.
Yeah,
What do you do with this wall that you?
back to squash courts. I don't know.
Yeah, back to a squash court.
Ray, I think we made the mistake when we renovated Fountain Park and put stuff in the middle of the pool that basically makes it difficult to run lessons, dangerous. Tried to pull it out, but it was too expensive to pull out. So we learned that lesson.
Yeah.
It just
Good
has
point.
adaptable space.
Yeah.
It uses for many things and in this environment, heated inside.
Yeah.
That's all really valuable feedback.
And do with it whatever you want with this suggestion, but, you know, if we just ask them what they want, we don't give any parameters, then everybody can just, they don't understand the limitations, and there's a limitation to the site.
Yeah.
And there's a limitation to cost. So even if you gave them a range, like if you say, if you had $100 million and you have 25 acres and we have to take this much for parking and this much for this, which remains this, which amenities do you want? And then say how much space it's going to take on the site. Because then they have to rank, like, what do they want to have? And when they hit 100 million, that's it. Because they're going to have the same problem that the council would have. So that might be a bit easier if we explain to them a range of costs and say that your max budget is this. And then say, understand that we are not spending it all at once. And that this is the land and that is finite. So that would give them ability to actually start prioritizing, I suppose, because otherwise all we're just going to get is what they want without really thinking about the consequences of it, but especially the land, right? Because we can't make more of it. And we already got rid of some of it. And the other thing that I think, and you guys are probably do this anyway, but I'll just say it, is that when we figure out what phasing goes in, we want to make sure that how we build it, we can still use it while the other phase is figured out. Right? So that way we're not sterilizing stuff that we just built, saying in 5 more years you can use it. And that is still enjoyable to use, right? So it might be that we have to build the building first so that the rest of it doesn't get disrupted.
Yes, good thoughts.
All really good feedback.
Anyway, that's it.
We can use the dirt from the pool to build the mountain bikes.
You totally could, right? But it's just like if we say we're gonna build a field and then it's like totally dusty, you'll get nothing but people complaining about how they can't play and it's just dirt.
Great feedback.
So you have to like build over there, and build it here, right?
I'll just keep moving on because I'm running out of time and getting a little book here. So really, as we finish with the confirmation of the needs assessment, we move on to the what it will be. So that's really where we start the stage of planning for the community amenities site. This concept planning will be based on the needs assessment prioritization, but we do need to consider the site information constraints and alignments to varying infrastructure to get a concept plan for the community amenities site in the end. So the concept plan will outline proposed components, layout, and give visual representation of the community amenities site development. Once that plan is laid out, we then go to a second phase of engagement where we will take it for a test drive with the public and get some feedback on that concept plan, hear what they like, maybe what's not working for them, so we can get some feedback before we make it final. And this information will be valuable to make any necessary revisions, tweaks, and complete the final concept design. Couple notes for you though. It's important to note that through the concept planning, there might be 2 residual income outcomes that we are expecting possibly to occur. First of all, we may find out there may be some high priority amenities from our needs assessment that maybe don't fit on that site, or maybe there's a logistic reason we can't locate them there, or they don't make sense with the other amenities planned. But they're really important to identify because they'll help develop our future recreation amenities priorities for other lands. We also may find there are some lower priority amenities that make sense to be included as a component of the community amenities project, as it makes sense for facility operations or the like. So really the processes for the planning and the engagement will be iterative. They'll shift and flex as we need to, but it'll be a focus to ensure that the process is robust, transparent, and we have open and honest dialogue with the public through all phases. And this will help make sure that we make sound, educated decisions about amenity development along the way. So one other note I wanted to make is that it's a really important distinction to be highlighted that from a public participation process is the need to have a solid and robust communication plan for this project. Want to flip one more? A communication plan will be developed through our internal staff, whether that's business and marketing or corporate communications, who have the subject matter expertise to ensure an appropriate format and messaging to meet the target audiences for this project. So it will do a number of things. It will keep our internal and external stakeholders well engaged and aware. It will provide an opportunity to build a brand for this project and to build excitement, encourage involvement of the public and the community pride in its early days. An example of that is Flourish. I think someone brought that up earlier. It was a revisit to our municipal development plan, but had a name, had a brand. It got people thinking about it in a different perspective, and it became a visual identity. And the solid communication plan will also ensure that we share the right information at the right time through the right tools with regard to this project. And we can use it to update project status, timelines, and key important events. So this is a really exciting project for us as we embark on it in our next stages. We don't want to miss the opportunity to inform and engage with our public throughout. But my last question for council is that, is there any considerations, factors, or hesitancies you want to make us aware of before we kind of embark on this work? Any information you can share with us will just help to make sure the plan is really robust and thoughtful. And I think you've shared some already, and Councillor Broadhead and a cost perspective, and Councillor Hanson just making sure we've got the right people and looking to the future. But anything else you can share with us at this point really just sets us off on the right tone.
You know, consider what the other projects are that we have tax increases for that year. Because like, for example, we have the fire hall coming in. So then the year, if we plan to do something, we don't want the tax increase to add to it on the year the fire halls are being built.
So like a spacing of the capital investment?
Yeah, just what other expected debt loads or increases that we're expecting to have in those years so that we don't combine it and compound it on the wrong year. I think people would be more acceptable to have a 4 and 4 than a 3 and 7 or something like that.
Yep, space it out.
Yep.
What about synergies with non-recreational uses? So I was thinking school, if we're gonna attach a high school, that should come into consideration, or even some of the commercial around there. You know, if they're, I would hope that they would be building commercial that would support a rec facility, but I think the conversation with Rohit and whoever's developing that should be
nice.
Yeah, it's excellent. Great. And with that, I'll turn it back to Diane. She's going to provide a summary and go over to the next steps.
I'm just going to take 30 seconds just to wrap it up really quickly. So again, thank you all for your time today. It was really valuable for us. Our next steps are, we are going to take the feedback we received today and we're going to tweak our model. We're going to go back and look at what the priorities are, how they're weighted, how they're assessed. We're going to go back and do all that work before we go to public engagement. When we see you next, we'll be back to council in end of first quarter, beginning of second quarter of 2022. We'll have what we heard from the residents. We'll have, here's what the priorities are based on our principles. Then we're going to go back out and we're going to do a concept plan. As Danielle said, we're going to test drive it and then we're going to bring it back with council's input for you to look at what are some of the concept plans, what are the phasing, what are the costing, what is this going to look like? And it should all line up in time for 2023 budget. So Q3 of 2022, we should have a fairly solid plan, and then council can make some decisions about what, when, where, and how we're going to build this. Build several amenities or whatever the plan looks like. So again, thank you so much for all your time today. It was very valuable for our project.
awesome. It was fun.
Awesome.
Good job.
As long as we didn't confuse